Just about. All right, I think I can stop that. Let's stop this. Recording PC. Now let's see if that isn't going to work. I'm trying a new system. To see if I can't satisfy the radio station at the same time. I can do. Except I have, oh my goodness, I might be broadcasting. All right. I presume I am being heard with no feedback, with plenty of sound, at both the, unplug that, talk and the stream. And I only know that if I get some feedback from my listeners. And I've tried to set up a couple of additional systems here that I think might work. Well, good morning, everybody. It is Wednesday, Breaking Health Barriers with Dr. Jack Stockwell, me. And I've got a lot of good stuff to cover for you today. As I try to work through this, system that, well, I think it's indicative of I want to talk about the heart and the terrible conditions that exist in the hearts of most Americans today, and why we have that problem as a reflection of broadcasting remotely from K-Talk. I'm not bad-mouthing anybody. It's just yesterday was a disaster, and as much as I tried to get on the computer system at K-Talk, it kept kicking me out. I talked to Paul later. Paul told me what needed to be fixed, but I couldn't fix it because I couldn't get into it. Every time I tried to attach it, it threw me out. So finally, I just turned it off. And my goodness, the outrage! I think I should be impressed. I should be. The number of calls we got at the office. Holy smoke! There's more than a half a dozen of you out there listening. And whenever I can't do my show, boy, the alarms go off. I'm flattered, and I appreciate that. Anyway, I wanted to show you a statistic that showed up, and now I can bring this. I'm going to show this statistic to those who are watching online. Present, share screen. Is it this one? Yeah, there it is. This is just since February. What is today? February 12th, 49 new subscribers, 581 views, over almost 8,500 of minutes watched of this program just since the first of the month, 11 days ago. 49 new subscribers, 581 total views. Your channel updates from last month. There it is. Breaking Health Barriers, Dr. Jack Stockwell. Your February month in review is here. Your channel updates from last. Only those of you who are on the stream can see these pictures. Well, another reason why you might want to get into the stream. All right, I'll stop sharing that and go back to my beautiful face. There we go. And what is go? You know, I want to say humbled. I don't know if I'm humbled or not, but I do appreciate the opportunity to be doing this. I put it on manual. I think we're ready to rock and roll. I can see when there are interruptions that show up, and I think we're safe to broadcast today. So there's a couple of updates I want to give you. And then I want to get into the relationship between malnutrition and sickness. probably the thing that I describe more than anything else in my practice with my patients. I want to mention the lady that I saw on Monday who had come in from northwest Montana or Wyoming. She was told by somebody in that area about us, so she came down just in horrible, horrible condition. And a gymnast starting gymnastics at 5 years old. I said, can you do a backflip on the balancing beam? And she just got a big grin on her face. Yeah, I can't imagine anybody doing that. I mean, I've seen it in, gymnastics, female gymnastics. But she has had a multiple number of injuries and a multiple number of surgeries, and her spine was just a mess. And right after I got through working on her, she was so impressed with what had happened to her that her husband wanted to become a patient the next day, which was yesterday. And he is a world-class downhill racer. I only found that out yesterday. And his neck and spine were a mess compared to his wife's spine that was a mess. And I worked on him. I got some pictures. I have no idea what to do for these people without x-rays, because what I'm looking to fix, you can't feel. It's just, as I always say, it's too deep in the meat. So I have to get some films taken from different directions, not just one picture. There's several pictures that are involved, so I can get a 3-axis view of how the head's sitting on the neck and what I need to do to put it back in its proper position. So when I got his first x-ray and I put it up on the view box, because I don't do digital, I'm old school, I don't have digital films. I put it up on the view box, and my first thing out of my mouth was, ouch. And he's right there next to me. He started laughing. He says, that's what every doctor says that looks at my neck. I said, yes. Yeah, for good reason. You've been whiplashed one too many times. It was just a reverse S neck. I mean, it was a mess. C1 was sitting over top of C7 like it's supposed to, but there was this snaky curve in the whole thing. And you could see where several whiplashes had occurred. So downhill racing since he's a child. Anyway, as soon as I got through working on him, he stands up and he stands straight, and his wife tips her head back to look at him, and she goes, my goodness, you're taller. And I said, well, he's at least an inch. She says, no, he's at least 2 inches taller. And I said, yeah, because his spine just straightened up. And he just could not believe that the pain and the tension in his neck and the back of his head that's been there for years was gone. So I'm going to see them again briefly this morning, probably the first 2 people I see before they head back to Wyoming, and I won't see them until the end of next week. Then the week after that, I'm going to be down in Arizona teaching this to a group of doctors who want to become board certified in this work. And board certification in this work is very, very difficult to achieve. I don't know of any more difficult board certification than this, because it's not based on additional classes and testing. It's based on performance. You have to submit x-rays, pre and post x-rays, that show you know how to reduce the atlas subluxation complex, that you know how to reestablish the orthogonal relationship between the head and neck and that top bone in the neck back to that orthogonal relationship, or at least 80%. What we aim to do in our clinic is maximal reduction, because when you get maximal reduction of that misalignment, lives change. And which is why I love doing the kind of work I do. I was asked 3 times yesterday, what am I ever going to do if you retire? 3 times in one day I was asked that. I'm not retiring. I don't have anything like that planned. I have 2 younger brothers that are professionals in their own regard that are been retired for, I don't know, 10 years. And they kind of smile at me that I'm still working. I love what I do. I mean, the only thing I could possibly do if I were to retire would get back into my golf game so I could beat my little brother and his wife, golf stars. But you can only play so much golf. And I don't know what else I would do. And like anything else that requires an art, the more you do it, the better you get at it. So I had people teaching me this decades ago when I first began, who were still seeing patients in their 80s. So I probably will be doing it for some time, and I'm kind of rambling. What I wanted to do is get to a couple of important news items that have just recently come out regarding health of Americans, and then I want to get into the relationship between heart disease and malnutrition, because that's the primary cause of heart disease, and what we do in the clinic for it. So there was this new study that was published in JAMA Network Open, the Journal of American Medical Association, that shows that the number of children and adults diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder has increased 175% in the last 10 years. Adults as well. And the researchers were analyzing electronic, and I am getting this from Autism Speaks. You can go find this out for yourself, autismspeaks.org. And the researchers analyzed electronic health records and insurance claims data from over 12 million people from 2011 to 2022. And over that period, autism prevalence across the lifespan rose from 2.3 per thousand to 6.3 per thousand people. And while this study offers some insights into the trends in autism diagnosis over time, it doesn't replace or contradict the prevalence data from the CDC. And Autism Speaks is saying, you know, don't take our data over the CDC. Now, why is autism increasing? This is my problem with Autism Speaks, because they leave out one critical area of the cause of autism. But autism primarily is caused by environmental poisons, poisons that get into the system. There's a lot of avenues and vehicles for that to occur, but the results show that the highest rate of increase in autism in that 10-year period was in children aged 5 to 8, now at 30 per 1,000 children in 2022. And about the same as the most recent CDC prevalence rate. And among adults, the prevalence was notably low, predictably in those ages 45 and older. However, adults aged 26 to 34 saw the sharpest rise in diagnoses, with rates increasing by over 450%. Now think about that. You think about autism and you think about little kids. But the increase in autism among age 26 to 34, that's just 8 years. A span of 8 years, increased by 450%. Now the increase, the first excuse, well, excuse may not be a fair word. The first reason that they suspect this increase in adult diagnoses is that they were undiagnosed as a child. And they didn't get a diagnosis till they got into adulthood, when the challenges of daily life finally became too difficult to manage. Well, to have autism as a child and not be seen as autistic would have to be an incredibly subtle case. I mean, incredibly subtle case. The arguments have always been out there that autism has always been there the way it is now. We just never saw it before. I have autistic children I take care of in my clinic. You know an autistic child when you see one. Everything from mild symptoms to just outrageous behavior. There's this young boy I take care of. I think he's 8 or 9, maybe 10. And he can come into the clinic just screaming his head off and completely unmanageable, to where he's kind of got to be tied down on the, tied, figuratively speaking, by his parents on the adjusting table. And as soon as I get my hands on that atlas, that fast, immediately calms down, picks up one of his parents' phones and start looking at some of his Disney videos or whatever else, and all of a sudden you never know he's in the office. But I don't know that I've ever worked on an adult that necessarily has autism, especially if there's a 450% increase in a 10-year period of age 26 to 34. But anyway, the results are showing that males are more than 3 times as likely than females to get autism, an autism diagnosis. But the gap seems to be narrowing. The diagnosis rates rose by 305% among girls, 315 among women, compared to 185 among boys and 215 among men. So even though there's still 3 men or 3 boys to every girl diagnosis, the increase in diagnosis among women is greater than the diagnosis among men. So as I read through here, Andy Shee, who's the chief science officer at Autism Speaks, this study is a significant step toward in our community forward. It shows where we're making progress, but also where we need to improve, especially when it comes to adults, women, and girls, and diverse communities. As diagnosis rates increase, our focus should be on bridging gaps to health care access and ensuring access to culturally informed care across the lifespan. Now that sentence is a mouthful. As diagnosis rates rise, our focus should be on bridging gaps in health care access. Nothing about what's causing it. Just access to getting health care, which is why Autism Speaks is the leading autism platform out there. They never once talk about vaccines. And the just incredible abundance now of information, peer-reviewed science pouring forth, showing the link. They simply will not consider it. And you know why? Because the people who fund them will stop funding them if they talk about that. Now, I want to get to Merle Case's newsletter, and then I want to get into the relationship between heart and malnutrition. This is dated February 8th from Merle Nass, N-A-S-S. She is a Substack contributor. This is the title of her article. CDC has issued a bulletin requiring hospitals to test for bird flu, H5N1, so that they can find human cases and start the vaccine rollout. And then she said, the subtitle, was this the idea of Gerald Parker, doctor of veterinary medicine, former Fort Detrick, one health proponent, just appointed to head the White House Office on Pandemic Preparedness and Response Policy? And then you say, well, why do they have a veterinarian in this position? Because a veterinarian, for the most part, as I know, takes care of mammals for the most part. I know there are veterinarians that take care of lizards. But mammalian physiology, interspecies has variance. But what can kill a cow can pretty well kill a human. What can kill a bird may or may not kill a human, because birds are not mammals. But anyway, this is, the CDC released a Health Alert Network bulletin requesting hospitals to subtype flu A positive specimens and assess risk factors for H5 influenza in hospitalized patients with severe disease. Commencing on Monday, February 10, all non-H1 or H3 or non-subtyped influenza A positive specimens from Advent Health ICU patients will undergo reflex surveillance subtyping to rule out H5. What's that mean? They're just going to be tested for H5N1. And they want anybody that is from Advent Health that was an ICU patient, find out if they are in the ICU for bird flu. Well, you can't say that they're in the ICU for bird flu. You can say they're in there for flu or flu-like symptoms. But the only way you're going to find out if it's bird flu is you got to go through the PCR testing. And the higher the amplitude of the PCR test, the more false positives. As Carrie Mullis, the inventor of the PCR test, said, you cannot use this test to diagnose. It just amplifies. It doesn't do anything else except amplify the presence of what you're looking for. Until there's enough of it, you can test it. That's all that test is good for. You cannot diagnose with it. And he said if you get it up to 40 amplifications, you'll find everything on the earth inside that blood sample. So anyway, I'm quoting from the Substack article. CDC posted its alert on the final Thursday before the end of the Biden administration, yet this message was sent yesterday, suggesting that a Trump official was now pushing it. But perhaps not, but scary. The blob really does want to create another plandemic, and we have to stop them. So this health alert network here, subtyping influenza A in hospitalized patients. Now remember, H5N1, the avian influenza, has been around for decades. That was the big bird flu that came out in the early 70s. And I've mentioned it before, there was that iconic picture of Gerald Ford opening up his belt in his pants and pulling down the backside over his right cheek where some healthcare official was injecting his butt with a bird flu vaccine, the H5N1 vaccine. Interestingly enough, I can't remember if it was 25 people or 50 people who died from it. But by the time there was 25 or 50 people who had died, they pulled the vaccine off the market and stopped it. With 50, let's just say 50 deaths. That's like 1 per state. The number of people who die from flu are hundreds per state. But one person, and I'm sure places like Wyoming didn't have any deaths. California had tons of them. New York, Florida. The point I'm trying to make is it became obvious that this was killing people, as opposed to the COVID vaccine. Well, I wasn't going to use those words because a YouTube bot will be reviewing this. And if I mention those words, they may well pull it down. I consider it a badge of honor that I've had many of my podcasts taken off of YouTube, simply because I was trying to get my audience to go out and do a little research. All right, so the summary of this health advisory from Health Alert Network. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention is issuing this Health Alert Network health advisory to clinicians and laboratories due to sporadic human infections with avian influenza viruses amid high levels of seasonal influenza activity. Now, I think you understand that and what they're not saying in that sentence. There's a whole mess of flu out there. We just want to know if there's any bird flu hiding in it. CDC is recommending a shortened timeline for subtyping all influenza A specimens among hospitalized patients and increasing efforts at clinical laboratories to identify non-seasonal influenza. So in other words, bird flu can show up at any time. Clinicians and laboratorians are reminded to test for influenza in patients with suspected influenza and going forward to now expedite the subtyping of influenza A positive specimens from hospitalized patients, particularly those in an intensive care unit. This approach can help prevent delays in identifying human infections with avian influenza viruses, supporting optimal patient care and timely infection control and case investigation. Now, it's a rather lengthy thing, and I'm not going to go through it because there's a lot of laboratory E's in there that some words I don't understand. Most of them I think I might have to explain. But I'm looking for the testing method because that's very, very important. But they're talking about all the different types of where to get the samples and the different ways in which to. Here, recommendations for the public. People should avoid direct contact with wild birds and other animals infected with or suspected to be infected with avian influenza A viruses. I don't have any contact with wild birds, and they don't have any contact with me. In fact, wild birds have a way of avoiding me. There's a park back behind where I live that has ducks and an occasional grouse and pheasant. And when we happen upon one another, they run for their lives. So that I don't really have fly for their lives. I don't really have contact with wild birds. I suppose there are people whose professions involve wild birds as opposed to domestic birds like your backyard chickens. However, it is Merle Nass's contention here that this is just setting the stage for the next pandemic. Now, H5N9 is a variant of this. H5N1 is bird flu nonspecific. H5N9 is the one that they're now calling deadly. And if you get H5N9 subtype, your chances of survival are like 10%, I think were the numbers in my investigation of the subject. They're not talking about H5N9, only in research circles. But be ready. And Hotez, Peter Hotez, who was kind of Fauci's right-hand man, both of whom belong in prison, in my opinion, for the number of people that they've killed, said there'll be another pandemic right after the inauguration. Another pandemic right after the inauguration. I don't know if he has a crystal ball or if it is indeed a pandemic. But I want to bring this to your attention just so you know what is big in the news. Well, the IDF is getting ready to move back into Gaza and kill a bunch of more Palestinians under the excuse of hunting down and killing every last member of Hamas. The Ukraine, the money has been cut off, but weapons are still showing up because they paid for them. What else? The Panama Canal may end up becoming under our auspices again. Google Maps is now reporting that the Gulf of Mexico is now the Gulf of America. The Danes are willing to swap California for Greenland. What other nonsense stuff is out there? I think that was kind of cute. Anyway, all these things are out there, and what is lurking behind the news that you don't hear too much of is today Tulsi Gabbard should become our next director of the DNI. Hopefully that happens. I think tomorrow is Patel, later this week is Bobby Jr. I honestly believe in my heart of hearts, if these three people do not get into those offices, there is no hope for this republic or getting the republic back, as good as things are looking. If you've seen the recent presser with Elon Musk in the president's office, and Musk talking about the stuff that they found. and they haven't even got to the Department of Defense or the Department of the Treasury yet. When things go sour, they go sour really bad. Okay, so now I want to get into, halfway through the show here, I want to get into what I believe is the number one cause of disease. Oh, with the couple that came from Northwest Wyoming. I have a free consultation. Takes about 30 minutes. You want me to take care of you, there'll be a charge at that point. If you don't, you know, you go on your way, I'll give you some information to take with you, and we'll still be friends. But you obviously need to schedule it through the office. The office number is 801-523-1890. 801-523-1890. And along with that, another thing that I want to announce that is in development right now are Jax Packs. We attempted to do something like this about 15 years ago when Charlie Dubois, the president of Standard Process, came out to my office 15 years ago when I had a much larger national radio show. And we talked about how we were going to get Standard Process products advertised nationally this way without Standard Process endorsing it. Because Standard Process is walking a thin line with the FDA. The FDA does not want Standard Process in business because it robs people of their opportunities to be on drugs. When you feed the body, especially the heart that's specifically designed for the heart, you may not need your medication anymore. And you might actually regrow a new heart. Now, medicine doesn't like that, but it's a true fact. You can completely replace the heart in a matter of months. Now, if it's been damaged by serious heart attack, then that's the exception. But a weakening heart, because we do it all the time, we strengthen the heart nutritionally. Now, I'm just mentioning these things in light of the fact that Charlie wanted to be able to get his products out there to a much larger audience without endorsing it. I would have to endorse it as my product, or at least a third party selling Standard Process. So Jack's Pack was a box that would contain several different products all in one at a discounted price to address female hormonal issues, digestive issues, heart issues, immune system issues, these kinds of things. And there'd be a few basic ones. Well, we have resurrected that, and we're in the process in the office now of getting Jack's Packs put back together. And because people will come in and say, well, what do you have for immune system? Well, we've got this and this and this and this and this and this, and that's too much, altogether. Well, what's the most important? Well, this one, but this one works even better if it's got this one. I don't care what part of the body, that's true. And so we are putting this back together. Hopefully, by the middle of March, maybe earlier, this will be ready so that when someone comes in the office or established patients, what do you have for children's immune system? Our kids are sick all the time. Right here, Jack's Pack for this. What do you have for UTIs, female UTI? Right here, Jack's Pack for this. And it's at a few products in there at a discounted price. So to try to make it palatable, but also because it will address the malnutritional problem in the body that has allowed these kinds of conditions to occur. Now, this comes into how I describe the basic philosophical difference between medicine and alternative medicine. And medicine, by and large, as a whole, and there's exceptions to this, believes that the body in and of itself is capable of taking care of itself, but as we go through the pathway of life, there are landmines. There are crevices in the ice cap. There are asteroids that fall out of space and hit us. There are grenades that are thrown in our direction, and so we just move right along, and suddenly we have cancer. Suddenly we have a heart attack. Suddenly we have Lyme's disease without ever having spent 1 minute in the forest or some other thing. And that it's unfair because it's not your fault. But we've got therapies for it, starting with drugs. We can help you with these problems. That's the medical point of view. The alternative point of view is the body is really vitalistic, and as it agrees with medicine, the body is capable of taking care of itself, provided it's given what it needs. And if you feed it correctly, and you give it clean water and rest, and an emotional environment where they're not constantly on the edge all the time, the body can go until it's in its 80s and 90s without ever having anything more than maybe a minor cold now and then. But which of those two philosophies is true? They both are. And so as we go through life, we need a little of this and we need a little of that. We need a lot of this, we need a lot of that. As we navigate incorporating both philosophies into our life and applying whichever one needs to be applied at a particular time that it needs to be applied. Now, we live in a country that has more good doctors and more great medical schools and more hospitals and more education and more great scientists and more money than anywhere else on earth. And we hear all these great scientific advances that are being made in public health and in medicine. And it's true that great advances have occurred in certain branches of medicine, but despite all of this, everybody in this country, to some degree or another, is sick. This is what Bobby Kennedy is all about. I call him Bobby instead of RFK because I feel a kinship with the man. I know what everybody else knows about his earlier life, and I don't care. What I care about is the position he's in now and his belief and his philosophy to make America healthy again. And he talks about how more than 50% of American children have chronic diseases. A third, almost approaching half of adults are obese. And he goes on as how we are the sickest people on the face of the planet, despite what I just got through describing, the advances that modern medicine has made in our lives. And of all the patients I take care of, there's hardly any of them that doesn't have at least one problem outside of spinal misalignment. And when you look at the medical anthologies of our grandparents, great-grandparents now, they didn't have these problems. Now, it's hard to find a kid in school anymore that doesn't have cavities or doesn't need braces. That wasn't always the case. Last year, we had more cancer than ever. We had more heart disease. Heart disease, of course, is the leading cause of death. And it's killing young kids now, young people under the age of 25. You've had more high blood pressure, more stomach ulcers, more neuropathies, more diabetes, more mental disease. A significant percentage of hospital beds now are filled with mental patients. And more mental hospitals are being built. Maybe we're not so smart after all. Maybe there's something wrong here. Maybe in the light of all these wonderful, great advances and discoveries we've made in medicine and healthcare, something's wrong somewhere. And there are places in the world that these degenerative diseases do not occur. I've mentioned it many times on my show. There's a place in India called Hunza, where a British physician, many, many years ago, assigned to this area through the, now this is back when Britain was still pretty well tied up with India. But it's a Dr. Robert McCarrison, and I've read some of his notes. He looked in vain for years to find a case of cancer. Couldn't find one. He said people would live to be 110 years old. 70-year-old men could run 20 miles a day. That's how they got around, was by running. And he said the reason he found in his research of these people, the reason that they had such abundant health is because of three very simple things that we don't do. They eat natural food that's grown from soil that's actually fertile, and they eat it fresh, and they don't store anything except fermented food, and that's it. Now, the great fundamental reason why all of us are sick, from my point of view, is simply nutrition, because our land is simply worn out. The farmers of America have violated another one of God's natural laws, the nature's law of return. You have to put back in what you take out. And the farmers, well, the law states that if you take away from me, you have to give me something back in return for that. If I take something from you, I need to give you something back in return for that. But our farmers have simply violated this law because they've cut down the trees, plowed up the land, planted cotton one year, corn the next, burned the stalks, constantly taken out and never putting anything back into the soil except synthetic material. And as a result, the land has become very poor in its nutritive value. And poor land grows poor food. If there's no vitalism in the soil, there will be none in the food, even though it looks good. Tomatoes, blood red, and peppers, emerald green, and the carrots like a harvest moon. And they're low in minerals, they're low in enzymes, and the protein quality is poor because it's incomplete. What does this mean? This means sick people who eat this food. And the most common disease in America today, and in my opinion, and what I see with my patients, is hypoproteinosis. They simply are not getting enough good quality protein. Or they're consuming too much protein of poor quality. And this is of tremendous significance. The vitamins, the enzymes, the antibodies that give us resistance to disease are all what are known as proteinaceous substances. They're all based in protein. And about the time the land started to wear out and the topsoil got thinner and thinner and thinner, to where the average topsoil in Iowa today, where your corn comes from, is less than an inch. Science came to the rescue about the time this got as bad as it is. And in this country, we've been taught to, whether it's farming or our own health care or the health care of our pets or whatever else, to bow down and worship the word science. And in this instance, through the chemical trust that was created by the U.S. Department of Agriculture and state colleges, A&M type of colleges, like here in Utah State, and the county agents gave to farmers the commercial NKP, nitrogen, potassium, and phosphate fertilizers. And they said to the farmer, if you will put this on your land, we promise you'll grow twice as much and it will put more money in the bank. And of course that was true. You put NKP into the soil, stuff is going to burst out of it. But what is it bringing with it? Nothing more than what was in the soil. It's not going to create nutrition-rich food if the nutrition is not in the soil to get into the food. So unfortunately, you know, what happened when they started doing this is the land got worse and worse, and they had to put on more and more fertilizer. And what it does is it doesn't make the land rich. It makes the land more poor. At the same time, it produces beautifully looking produce. And it just drives out what remaining fertility is left in the soil. Finally, you end up with dead, hard concrete type of soil because the topsoil's gone. A concrete slab would probably be a better name for it. So the end of chemical farming is always disease. First in the land, then in the plant, then in the animal, and then in us. And everywhere in the world where chemical farming is practiced, the people are sick. And the use of synthetic chemicals does not make the land rich. It makes it more poor than it was before. And there is only one way to make land rich so that it produces rich food. By rich, I mean rich in nutrients. And it's the same thing that Mother Nature does on the floor of the forest. You put back in 3 parts dead plant material and 1 part dead animal material. That's what leaf mold contains. And this puts everything back into the soil. The major elements plus the trace elements plus dead, dying organic matter in proper proportions. And anybody who puts an organic garden in their backyard knows what I'm talking about if they're composting. And when I say dead and decaying matter, that proposes that at one time that matter had life. I mean, the leaf at one time was a living thing. A lot of people will gather up their leaves in the fall and throw it into a compost pile that do backyard gardening, along with a bunch of other things. This is of tremendous importance. You have to have death and decay if you want life and growth. That's how Mother Nature works. I was just watching the news here before. I don't remember if it was national or local. They have composting of the dead now. You're aware of that. There's about 24 states or so that allow this. You take your dead, and they're put into composting material. Literally, composting material that breaks the body down the way the body would be broken down by Mother Nature if the body was buried in dirt, wrapped in muslin, so there's some sanctity to it. And then you don't have them in coffins, you don't have them in vaults. You put them back into the ground so the worms can get to them. And they take the nutrition that is in that dead body and put it back into the soil. That's how life works. So whether it's a dead deer, a moose, a lion, an elephant, or a human being, that's Mother Nature's rules. You have to have death and decay to have life and growth. And it's a natural cycle that no chemist can get around, no matter how many degrees they have or how many letters are after their name. The end result of the decaying process in the soil, whether it's leaves or pine needles or small or large animals or human beings, what is left over are amino acids and carbonic acids. And these are the little building blocks that make plants of high protein quality that animals come along and eat, or we eat those plants, or we eat the animals that ate those plants. And how can a plant produce high quality amino acids, the building blocks of proteins, if they're not in the soil that those commercial foods were grown in? It can't. And this is the fundamental reasons why proteins produced on the commercial farms of America are in terribly poor quality. Now, I have been to the standard process farms in Palmyra, Wisconsin, I think 4 times. I'll probably be up there again this summer as a guest. And it's almost it's over 900 acres of organic farming run by 5 people. They have so sophisticated the process of organic farming using high-tech equipment, most of which they get from Germany, no less. I've seen this equipment in operation. It's magical how one person or 2 persons pulling, with tractors, pulling this equipment with all these little blades and all of this tilling stuff and everything else produces weed-free acres after acres after acres of these plants in soil that is rotated, that has a cover crop in the winter to make sure nitrogen-rich soil is there for the next year or 2 years later planting. Now, of the 900 plus acres that they have there on an organic farm, they're not all full of vegetables. Some of them are cover crops. Some of them are rotation crops. Some of them are left alone for the winter snows, but they rotate the soil. There was one place where I saw the topsoil was at least, they stopped the tractor that we were on. The soil was the topsoil at least 2 feet thick. And they were growing these odd-looking purple-colored carrots that were as long as the soil was deep. So when they harvest those carrots and pull them out, that hole goes all the way down. So the regular rotating rains that come through get water all the way down to the lowest levels of that topsoil. Who'd think of that? Well, organic farmers do. The greater substance that is present in these standard process supplements come from that soil. It's why I say, when salesmen for other companies come by and I look at the ingredients, of course it's all chemicals of their products, and I make the comment to them, I've said this too, I probably sound like a broken record, how many farmers are sitting on your board of directors? We don't need no stinking farmers. This was created by a biochemical scientist at University of Utah. Oh, really? He's got one up on Mother Nature. Oh, no, it works. And yes, I know it works. But why does it work? It's a drug. Oh, no, it's not a drug. It's a drug. It's a drug by the plain definition that a drug is something that forces the body to do something. Does that mean herbs are drugs? No, but herbs have a drug-like effect on the body because drugs stimulate something to happen. Herbs are not nutritious. We don't eat herbs or take herbs for the fat, protein, and carbohydrate content of that food. We take certain herbs because we have known through thousands of years of research in whichever country they were researching it, that this particular milk thistle is a great tonic for the liver. And then drug companies come along and look at milk thistle. Well, here's all the components of milk thistle. We think this is the one that does the job. We're going to patent this and make a drug out of it for the liver. That's what medicine does. But you can't beat Mother Nature's milk thistle. Now, I'm saying all of that because Utah's farmers, in many places, have some of the richest land in America. And they made it rich because they clean out the barns and the hen houses, and that goes back into the soil, and they save the leaves, and they plant, in one place I know of Austrian winter peas for a winter cover crop. And there is a difference between the God-given free nitrogen that the Austrian winter peas or some other cover crop puts back into the soil through the little nodules on their little roots, and the kind of as compared to the kind of nitrogen farmers buy in sacks of synthetic chemical fertilizer to put in the soil. I don't know exactly what the difference is between Mother Nature's nitrogen and DuPont's nitrogen, but I suspect that I don't know that any chemist will ever discover the difference. Maybe the life factor, the living factor from where this stuff came from could be the answer. I have seen where farmers have restored multi-acre farms by cleaning up the bushes, leveling the land, and just planting beans. They've added ground limestone, they've added crushed up rock phosphate, and they still are using a lot of these natural rock fertilizers, although I think they can get to the point by just rotating everything and cover crops in the winter, they may not have to do that anymore. But grass is a great healer. And the way to change poor land is to put back in the grass. And then for a year or two, you mow the grass and you leave the clippings right where you cut it, on the ground to rot. And if you put plant matter back in, and anybody that's got a good, healthy backyard garden knows exactly what I'm talking about. Nature herself will furnish the animal matter if you just put this plant material back in there. The birds, the rabbits, the bugs, the earthworms will revitalize that soil. And fertile soil is usually dark in color. It's soft. That soil, that topsoil I was talking about at the Standard Process Farms, holy smoke. Have I gone too far? No, I'm just going to keep going here. The 2 feet, it's all black. It's just black. And you can grab it and it just falls to pieces in your hands. And when it rains, the whole soil gets soaked. They don't have a lot of runoff when it rains because it all goes down into that 2 feet of topsoil. And there's some places where the topsoil is much thicker than that. And so fertile soil is full of both life and death. Death, decay of organic matter, and life in the form of bacteria and mold and earthworms and the little bugs that start showing up that break down the decaying dead matter into forms that can recycle through the new plants that are planted. Some of the thickest topsoil in American history were the Great Plains, where millions of head of buffalo would move through on regular, migration things, eating the grass and leaving behind their bison cow pies that would go back into the soil, where the topsoil ended up being several feet thick until the commercial farms took over. And Bruce, I think I just saw your note there about the causes of the Dust Bowl. Several years, farmers have been taught not to plow, simply seed over existing land. I've heard of great, tremendous wars in the Northeast America, which created very good soil. Yeah. Okay. All right. So so what is fertile soil? Well, the next reason we're all sick is we no longer eat natural foods. What's a natural food? Natural food, I mean simply foods that still has within the food, by the time it reaches your mouth, vitamins, enzymes, minerals that nature put in there. Unfortunately, 80% of the food that's consumed by Americans today, maybe 90%, the vitamins, the minerals, the enzymes have been removed. White sugar is probably the worst food in the American diet. White sugar is so bad, even worms will not eat it. You never saw a worm in white sugar. Mealworms, and you never will. Raw sugar, on the other hand, is a natural food. And while white sugar is just like raw sugar, except the white sugar has had all the vitamins and minerals removed, refining is what they call it, refined sugar. It's a good word, but it's the wrong word. Refiners will take the raw sugar. If you've seen the process, you can see it on YouTube. It goes through 14 steps in order to get all the good parts out of the raw sugar. And the good part, like blackstrap molasses. What do you know what they do with that? You know the major use of blackstrap molasses? They put it in cattle feed. Why? Because you raise cattle for a profit. You raise cattle to make money. You're not, if cattle looked like the average American, no one would buy your cow. I mean, it gets so stinking obvious. And I have these conversations with my patients, and I keep having to go back to square one all the time. So the pure sucrose, the white sugar, the chemical, we eat it. And white sugar is going to make you fat. It'll give you energy. It's in your soft drinks, candy bars. It's going to give you energy. But that's all it's going to give you. I mean, why does the mealworm not get into white sugar like it will whole wheat or oats or something else? Because they have the good given God sense to leave it alone. And why do they take the good part out? It's a selfish commercial reason. Food processors aren't in the business of food processing for any other reason than to make a profit. And so it's done so. Why do they go through this 14-step with sugar beets or cane sugar, whatever else, to end up with that white powder? Because sugar will keep. Raw sugar won't. Processed white sugar will keep. You put it in a 100-pound bag and put it for years in dirty warehouses and still be sold for a profit. And it's, it's brown rice, for instance, is one of the best foods in the world today. You hear about, well, the Chinese were able to live on rice. Brown rice, many people in the Orient, or what we call Oriental countries, still live on brown rice because it's one of the richest sources of natural vitamin B complex, which is essential to good health, especially the heart, which I'm going to get to here before long. White rice is exactly like brown rice, except all the vitamins and the minerals and the enzymes have been polished away for one reason, so that rice will keep in 100-pound bags in dirty warehouses. White rice is just raw starch, like white bread, unfit for human consumption. But it tastes so good. It's designed to taste good. Yeah. Why? So they can make a profit selling it to you. They don't have to put a warning on the side of a bag of bread like they do a box of cigarettes. The Surgeon General is determined that this white bread will destroy your teeth, your bones, and make you fat. They should put it on there, but I don't let anybody read it. Because a fresh bacon, lettuce, and tomato sandwich right out of garden tomato harvest on white bread. Wheat flour is probably one of the most important foods because people, the average American, will be eating bread 3 times a day, 7 days a week. And white flour is also completely unfit for human consumption. First of all, because all the vitamins and the minerals and the enzymes have been removed. Why? For storage. The kernel or the wheat germ and the outside layers of the grain, the bran, have all been removed in the milling of the flour. Crackers, spaghetti, macaroni, noodle soup, cake mixes have all the essential nutrients removed before it gets to your grocery bag in the supermarket. The endosperm, or the starchy part of the grain, is made into white flour. And the part that's necessary for energy is this. You'll get energy from eating this, no doubt about it, but without the vitamins and the enzymes and the minerals in proper proportions, you end up with fat, sick people. Now, there's another reason why white flour is unfit for human consumption, because for years and years it was bleached with nitrogen trichloride to make it whiter and whiter and whiter. And this chemical is it still is a central nervous system poison, and it tested on animals in state colleges. It would give these animals epileptic fits, as they called them back then. And it's, I think, one of the reasons why the large majority of patients in mental hospitals are there, because they've been robbed of these vital vitamin B components and vitamin E and vitamin A. So right when I was born, 1950, 1949, 1950, 1951, most of the millers in the country who milled wheat into flour changed the chlorine process of bleaching. So they started using chlorine dioxide. Chlorine is also a poison. And another reason why white flour is no good is because it's been enriched. Why would you enrich something you're selling? If you're taking something that you're representing as having been sold by Mother Nature, why would you enrich it? Well, you're constantly told, you've heard it in church, your daily bread, wheat is the staff of life, these kinds of things. Again, wheat being the staff of life came from wheat when it was healthy. The wheat you have today is not the wheat they're talking about as the staff of life. It's not the wheat they're talking about in Section 86 in the Doctrine and Covenants of LDS fame. The wheat today is not that wheat. Don't be fooled. So what is enriched bread? Why do they enrich it? Well, you take perfectly good grain of wheat, and then you remove anything that made it healthy, the vitamins, the minerals, and the enzymes. And then you take this raw starch and you put back into it these dead synthetic chemicals, niacin, thiamine, riboflavin. We call them vitamins B1, B2, and B3. You put in inorganic iron, and these three of the vitamin B complex, and the wheat germ is one of the very best sources, contains wheat germ, we know there's somewhere between 20, 25, maybe 30 parts we've identified. Mostly there's still unknown things in there. You take all this stuff out, take the germ out, take the real vitamin B out of it. We know that the germ, the wheat germ, is also one of the richest sources of vitamin E on the planet, which has been proved a number of times, long before I was born, to be a vital component of a normal cardiovascular system. And the germ also has vitamins and enzymes, some yet unnamed. Do you know the vitamin B family now is gone into 40? Which brings up the question, whatever happened to vitamin B, 4, 8, 10, and 11? I'll get to that here before the hour is over, hopefully. But as these essential nutrients are removed, only 3 vitamins and a little bit of iron is added, put back into it. Enriched bread has these 3 synthetic vitamins, B1, B2, and 3, and enriched or an isolated form of iron your body can barely absorb. And this is what's called fragmentation. It violates the concept of totality. You take the totality that Mother Nature made and you fragment it into a way that stuff can be stored for a long time, because the stuff that spoils the quickest in foods is the stuff that's most nutritious. I don't care what berry or leaf or root or tree or animal you come up with. The thing that spoils the quickest is the most nutritious. It's the most full of life. And because it's the most full of life and nutrition, it is subject quickest to America's cleanup crew, nature's cleanup crew, the bacteria. Do you know in Canada it's against the law to enrich bread? And in most states, my last time I researched this, it's against the law not to enrich bleached flour. The Canadians are right. We're crazy. There is a lot more on this subject I can go into, but I want to spend a little bit of time about the heart, because the first organ in the body to suffer the fastest, the quickest from malnutrition is the heart. There's no reason other than what I can come up with for heart disease being the #1 killer in America because of our nutrition. Now, we have a device in the office called the heart sound recorder. You can Google it, you can look it up. It's a fantastic instrument. And it works on the basis of sound, not electrical conductivity. The EKG, which showed up in America about the same time the heart sound recorder did, and it was invented by Dr. Royal Lee, the inventor of standard process, a genius years before his time, and one of the most persecuted people by the FDA that I've ever seen. And, you know, there's a couple other names, it's not important. What's important is that these malfunctions inside the heart can be reversed. Medicine will give you drugs to mitigate the effect, the defects in the normal heart function between the systole and the diastole and the 4 chambers and the 4 valves and the septum and the myocardial, endocardial, pericardial, wherever the defect begins to show up. There are drugs to deal with it. Now, when we do a heart sound recorder on people, we find extra sounds, we find bundle branch block, we find fibrillation. In fact, I was just showing this to a lady yesterday, a good friend, it was a patient, a good friend. She was in there, she's listening, she knows who I'm talking to. I showed her this laminated picture we have of a fellow who brought us his EKG report. And it was just massive fibrillation. It just throughout the heart. It was fibrillate, not just the atrium. And he wanted to know what he should do. And I said, well, you need to come in and let's do a heart sound recorder so I can find where the problem is, not just that there are problems, and suggest, along with your cardiologist, of course, you don't stop your heart medication at all. We're just going to start feeding the heart. And I gave him some things that I suggested that he take, and he took them, but he didn't do the heart sound recorder. But he came back 2 weeks later with another EKG report showing the absence of fibrillation. It was gone, just by taking what I told him to take. And it's sitting there. It's on the desk in the office. You can see it for yourself. One side fibrillation, the other side none. 2-week time difference between them. Now, extra systoles, what they call extra, or just extra beats, extra heartbeat. You'll sit there and you'll feel something in your heart. You should never, ever feel your heart. You shouldn't know you have a heart. I mean, I have my hand over my heart. I don't feel anything. But I load myself up with heart supplementation every day. But I can feel my pulse. Yep, there's a pulse. That's not my heart. It's evidence I have a heart, but it's not my heart I'm feeling. My brachial pulse right here. And you can, if you get really good at feeling pulses, you can feel extra systoles, extra beats. Now, bundle branch block is where the electrical signal coming down the septum that gets at the bottom of the heart, coming from the apex down to the bottom, splits into the two ventricles, the left and the right, the signal to beat. The left ventricle is pumping blood to the body, the right ventricle is pumping blood to the heart. They're supposed to both beat at the exact same time with a very strong beat. Bundle branch is where there's an interruption in the coordination between the two ventricles, and they don't exactly beat together at the same time. That's a big warning sign. Fibrillation, of course, is kind of stuff going on. And it's very obvious in an EKG as it is in a heart sound recorder when fibrillation is present. Those little devices they have out there in the marketplace, that Cardia device, is a good device. You put your 2 fingers on it, if you've got fibrillation, it'll show. It doesn't tell you what to take, as I would tell you what to take, because we have that device in our office to go along with a heart sound recorder. Now, these phenomena, the extra heartbeat, the bundle branch block, the fibrillation, are due to a loss of electrical conductivity in the heart tissue for the impulses that it would otherwise have this synchronicity of the contractile rhythm of the heart muscle. And the heart block first starts as skipping a beat. And then it also starts showing up with an extra beat. So we'll have patients who come in for the scan. It takes about a half an hour. We'll tell you what you need to do. If you don't want to do it, that's fine. But it's going to be some supplement suggestions. And people will say, well, how long do I have to take this? Well, how long did it take you to get to this condition? I said, well, if you'll eat 4 to 6 ounces of liver twice a week, you don't have to take this. Baby calf liver. You mean a baby calf? Yeah, baby calf liver. Why baby calf liver? Because the first year that the calf is becoming whatever it's going to become, a steer or whatever, it's out in the grassy field eating grass. It nurses from its mother till mom kicks it away, and then it starts eating grass. The liver of a calf is far healthier than an adult liver that now, as it's been moved for the next year or two to fatten it up, eating grain, which it's not designed to eat, alfalfa and grain, or grain, at least grain the last 3 months of its life, to fatten it up. Wrong fat, mind you. And so when they look at this. I said, it's not that much. This is far less than what I'm telling. I take far more than this than you're taking. And I'm almost, well, I'm in my 75th year. I'm not going to say any more than that. That's enough about me. But patients will come in and they'll say, I can feel my heart skipping a beat. I said, you probably are. Or they'll say, I feel like I feel palpitations, extra beats. You probably are. Because the heart muscle has become so insensitive because of its own malnutritive weakness that it responds only to a second call. The brain isn't getting the oxygen at once, so it tells the heart, beat again. And the heart's going lub-dub, lub-dub, lub-dub. It's so weak that the lub is nothing like the lub was when you were 6 years old, just squeezing blood out of the heart like there's no tomorrow. Now it's pushing blood out of the heart, not shooting blood out of the heart. And so the brain isn't getting the oxygen at once, so it says, give me another beat. So you have, instead of lub-dub, 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 you have lub-dub, 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 lub-dub. That shows up on the heart sound recorder, just like it will in an EKG. Now, the cause of this was established before I was born. It's a deficiency in the cereal germ vitamin B4. Now, if you go search vitamin B4, you're going to see adenine. It's going to talk about adenine. It's going to talk about a few other things. They say that B4 today is adenine. It's not. This fraction of the B complex is essential to the normal motor function of heart nerves. When I tell this to my patients, because we can show a change in the heart scan. About you come in, we'll do the scan. After the scan's over, we don't do this for everybody, but if some people have some extra time, we'll do it. We'll give you some pills to chew up. And then wash them down. Hold them under your tongue. Create a little slurry in your mouth. Hold them under your tongue for about a minute and then swallow them down. And then retest you. And you will see an immediate improvement in the heart scan. That's how fast the heart responds to improved nutrition. Now, this fraction of the B vitamin, they discovered before I was born, takes the chemical energy of good food, not processed foods, foods that actually have this nutrition in it, will take the chemical energy of this food and convert it to electrical energy in the heart. Now, what if you were to start teaching back when I was born? There is no vitamin B4. And what if you were to teach people there's no difference between that yucky tasting whole wheat bread that grandma just ground up and made and enriched white bread that builds bodies 12 ways, now with iodine included? What's going to happen to the hearts of those humans over the decades that follow? You know, become the #1 killer in America. Vitamin B4 is also known as the anti-paralysis vitamin, and it's inseparable from the natural form of thiamine, vitamin B1. It's never found in synthetic thiamine. You buy vitamin B1 or thiamine or whatever in a health food store and read the labels, you will not find food in that label. You will find thiamine monohydrochloride or thiamine monochloride or hydrochloride, I think. And it's a physiological remedy for an enlarged heart. Why do hearts enlarge? Because the brain makes it enlarge, because the regular small heart that we have isn't pumping enough blood. So you start to get an enlarged heart. So it pumps more blood because the brain is not going on a fasting program for oxygen because the heart's getting weak. And the brain isn't going to say, all right, we'll work on half oxygen. That's silly, isn't it? It's stupid. So it makes the heart grow So and then when the heart begins to enlarge, muscle fibers start to stretch apart, but the valves, the sensitive heart tissue that holds that valve in place, begins to shrink or to expand a little bit. And then you start getting what they call a leaky valve. And you start having heart murmurs and extra sounds. Now, they have a great therapy in medicine for an enlarged heart. It's the heart bra. I'm serious. It's a bag you put over the heart that pulls the heart back together in a tighter space. American ingenuity, the heart bra. And so this continued deficiency of vitamin B4 results in greater or lesser degrees of nerve and muscle degeneration, but all of which is going to immediately affect the efficiency of that heart contraction, and quickly too. And so you get these murmurs. And these murmurs will disappear within a few minutes of ingesting natural vitamin B carrying the wheat germ concentrate of B4. I have talked about this so many times, and people will hear. People will hear what I'm talking about and come in. A lot of people will hear and they don't. When heart disease does not need to be the #1 killer in America. There's an extract of heart muscle tissue, bovine source, called cardiotrophin. And muscular fatigue and hypertrophy, the enlarged heart muscle, is usually treated with digitalis. Well, there is something, an extract from heart muscle that's called cardiotrophin. It's one of the 3 things we recommend when we see a heart scan. It works quicker than digitalis when tested on a patient with a weakened, flabby heart, as shown by, it will show up as a weak or extended first sound. In other words, the lub-dub that shows up on the heart scan, the sound has a certain spectrum to it. Spectrum's not the right word. A certain amount of time it takes for that lub-dub to take place. And when it stretches out, when the lub takes too long, I know there's a vitamin B1 deficiency there. Because we'll give you vitamin B1 in food form. 20 minutes later, it tightens down that fast. Oh, Mother Nature is brilliant. And the second sound, you have a lub and then you have a dub. The dub is supposed to be the closing of the valves at the end of the heart contraction. The heart contraction causes the biggest signal. The closing of the valves is a not so strong a signal because it doesn't make as much noise, but it should be snappy. The example that I give to patients is, I remember as a kid, probably right up, I remember my Aunt Christine's back door of their house in Newark, Ohio, where we would go for a few weeks in the summertime. And I remember the back door, the screen door, had this spring on it. There's probably a lot of screen doors to this day that have that, but older houses, you know what I'm talking about. You'd open up that door, the back door, and it would just slam shut because of that strong spring to keep the flies and the mosquitoes out in the summertime. The second sound, the dub, lub-dub, is the closing of the valves. And it should be very short, not drawn out, like slamming shut. The valve should slam shut. What's the valve doing? It's preventing backflow of the blood into the area the blood just came from. So one of the most important of the 4 valves is the mitral. And the mitral is sitting there between the pulmonic, or the left atrium and the left ventricle. And when the left ventricle is ready to pump blood into the aorta to the body, the mitral has to slam shut so that that ejection of blood does not go backflow into the atrium, and the ventricle has to be strong enough to get the blood out. So if you have a weak heart muscle and you have a weak valve, or a valve that's been hurt by some organic problem or enlarged heart or whatever else, you're not going to get a very big what's called ejection fraction. How much of that blood is getting out of the heart on that beat into the aorta so that you have an efficiency of productive power here. Now, 65% is usually considered a healthy amount of blood. If you had 100 cc's of blood in the left ventricle, if you could get 65 cc's of that blood out, and remember, this is oxygen-rich blood coming back from the lungs. If you get at least 65 of those cc's out, you're going to have a healthy body, and the brain's going to go, ah, thank you for the oxygen. Thank you for the nutrients. If the ejection fraction starts dropping lower and lower and lower, the heart is going to speed up. You're going to get tachycardia, or you're going to get a higher blood pressure in order to get oxygen to the brain. Now, the second sound, if it's accentuated, then we know that there is high blood pressure in the body. Now, we'll take blood pressure anyway, but we know that it's a good indication of high blood pressure. If the pulmonary system, and you've heard about pulmonary edema, and you've heard about pulmonary hypertension, if the lungs have too much blood in them, then that will show up as well, and that's usually caused by hypoadrenia. Your adrenals aren't working properly. And there are vitamins to support the adrenals. Remember, cortisone and the other adrenal hormones require vitamins C and B, whole food vitamin C and B, not ascorbic acid and not the synthetic stuff, in order for them to work, for the adrenal hormones to work properly. And adrenal hormones are used throughout the body, but one of the principal reasons for adrenal hormones is to stimulate the heart. It's what epinephrine is there for, adrenaline is there for. And so patients that had problems with these signals on the scan, once we meet the vitamin requirement, these things normalize. And a lot of times they normalize in minutes. And they do very well thereafter with, just got a message. Thanks, Chad. But I feel pretty good, Chad. So there's an awful lot more here that we can talk about regarding the heart. There are damaged hearts, and when we see damage, when we see on the scan, or we can see on the scan that something serious is waiting in the wings, we'll tell you. It won't do any good to take the heart scan to a cardiologist. They won't understand it. And some of the most hard-headed MDs I've ever had to deal with are cardiologists. They won't understand what they're looking at because they don't study it. If they studied it, I guarantee you a cardiologist would want a heart sound recorder in his office, because an EKG can only see if damage has occurred. It can't see into the future. And by that I mean it's very difficult to predict things that might happen other than some subjective things from an EKG. But the heart sound recorder, when it shows principal weakness in this muscle or that valve, we know trouble's coming. And it's amazing to me, some of the younger people that we've done heart sound recorders on who have been eating processed foods and overly processed foods and pasteurized foods, how weak their hearts are by the time they hit 20 years old. No wonder there's an increasing number of heart attacks in people under 45. There are other supplements I recommend. I'm just talking about the major ones. Even with tachycardia. Tachycardia will obviously show up in the scan, the heart beating too fast. And potassium deficiency is usually the reason for tachycardia. The organically bound minerals, the things that we use, usually effective in bringing back control to normal rates within 15 to 20 minutes. Otherwise, the load on the heart, if everything else is okay, is regulated by how much oxygen demand there is in the tissues, principally the brain, but the other parts of the body. And the other parts of the body have nerve endings that tell the brain oxygen saturation at various parts of the body. I mean, the brain is in control of everything. Almost 80%, well, let me say 75%. 75% of your nervous system is just information coming into the brain. 25% is motor control. So you look at a professional athlete, you look at these guys pounding each other and running all over the field in the Super Bowl Sunday night. Their ability to do what they're doing through training, only 25% of their nervous system is really involved with motor control, to run, to push, to block, to tackle, whatever else. 75% is information coming into the brain constantly monitoring all the millions of physiological processes taking place inside the body. In fact, your nervous system is so present in the sense of volume in your body that if we took away your hair and took away your skin and took away your muscles and took away your organs, took away your bones, took away everything except your nervous system, you would still look like you look now. You would look a little gray, but we would see the corners of your eyes and your mouth and your nose and your ears. We would see the palms of your hands, part of the back of the hand would be missing, but we'd see the fingertips. And we'd see the other nerve-sensitive parts of the body. They would all be there, but we would see your face and recognize it. And most of those nerves are sending information to the brain. And the nervous system will not work functionally to the degree it's supposed to without B vitamins. Oh, it needs other vitamins, and it needs enzymes, and it needs other kinds of nutrition, especially proteins and fats, animal fats. I'm trying to hit the prescient points here, because I could go on for hours on this subject. And why is that? Because that's the stuff I talk the most about to my patients. So we know that if you're not getting enough oxygen, especially to the distant parts of the body, it puts a load on the heart. And we have found that using the vitamin C complex, the load on the heart can be greatly decreased because whole food vitamin C, not ascorbic acid, ascorbic acid won't do this. Whole food vitamin C can increase the oxygen carrying capabilities of the hemoglobin by over 250%. In fact, that's one of the major jobs of whole food vitamin C. And where do you find whole food vitamin C? Tree-ripened fruit, in mushrooms, and there's a few other sources. The fruit that you buy in the supermarket it doesn't have much vitamin C in it. The orange juice that you drink, if it has any vitamin C, it has ascorbic acid that's been put in there because the orange juice has been pasteurized. And the vitamin C is destroyed in pasteurization. My mother sends me and my two brothers a box of these oranges every Christmas. And they come at different times. They don't come on before Christmas Day because they're not ready to be picked. A good farmer knows exactly when to harvest what they've grown. It's like the chemists that are in the laboratories at Standard Process in Palmyra, Wisconsin. when harvest time comes, they're taking a sample of the plant, sometimes twice a day, and giving it an immediate chemical analysis. And when they see that it is at its optimum content for the very nutrition we're trying to get out of that plant, bingo, the alarms go off. Go out and harvest now, immediately. Because it could still look good for another 2 weeks on the vine or the leaf or the branch or whatever else. But it reaches a peak, and then it starts to fade in its nutritional content. That's just genius. I mean, it just amazes me. That's why when someone's trying to sell me some new product, and salesmen come to the office occasionally, I ask them, how many farmers do you have on your board of directors? You get this look on their face. I've said it before. Well, that's the most stupid question I was ever asked. Why would we want a farmer on our board of directors? And I know I'm talking to the wrong person. So the presence of vitamin C and vitamin E, your heart is absolutely dependent on vitamin E. You can't have strong heart muscle without whole food vitamin E. And you'll hear me say whole food vitamin C and whole food vitamin B and E and A and D and K, because most of the stuff out there is just synthetic versions of these things. They did not come from food. And just as you can buy commercial foods in the supermarket that are processed or super processed, hyper processed, over processed, that has almost no nutrition left in it at all except something to fill your belly and take away your hunger, the same thing happens when you process foods in the sense of supplements. And the more you process wheat, the less nutrition is left in there. The more you process rice, the more you process foods that come from minerally deficient soils so that they were no good when they were picked and less good when they finally get to the supermarket, you're going to end up with a nation full of fat, sick people. That's why a lot of these processes are not allowed in Europe. And again, it comes down to a financial reason. It's very simple to understand. The United States, out of the top 40 industrialized countries on the planet, is the only one that does not provide national health care. So the cost of disease in this country is not an issue, like it is in Europe, where those countries provide national health care. So they watch what's happening to the food supply very closely because they know that if their citizens in France or Germany or Italy or especially Switzerland were to eat American diets, their countries would go bankrupt for the number of fat, sick people that would be in the healthcare system. Canada is not too far behind the United States. There are some things in Canada that are banned that we have here, but Canada, unfortunately, has a lot of overly processed foods like we do and do not have the processed food restrictions that you see in Europe. And then that big argument of Bobby Kennedy when he's comparing McDonald's fries in London compared to McDonald's fries here. In McDonald's fries in London, there are 3 ingredients: potato, salt, and the fat it was fried in. Here, there's 17 ingredients in McDonald's fries. Not a whole lot of those ingredients are conducive to health. Mostly conducive to taste and to addict you to McDonald's fries. Now, the first time I ever had McDonald's fries was in 1965 in Northern Virginia, when it was 47 cents for a 3-course meal at McDonald's, the drive-in with the golden arches. That was the jingle on TV. 47 cents. You could have a hamburger, a small Coke, and fries. Those fries were cooked in beef tallow with salt. Absolutely delicious. You think a McDonald's fry now is delicious. I told you about that chain back east in the Midwest and back east that now have announced to the public they've gotten rid of the soybean oil or the canola oil, and they're now frying in beef tallow. Buffalo Wild Wings have delicious wings because they fry their wings in beef tallow. And I think you're going to see an awful lot more once Bobby Kennedy gets in there, I think you're going to see an awful lot more businesses getting rid of those damn seed oils and going back to Mother Nature's fats. All right, I'm getting off track here. So we've had patients with shortness of breath. You have them chew up 3 or 4 of Cataplex C tablets. In a matter of minutes, same thing with a pounding heart. Chew up 3 or 4 Cataplex C tablets because it increases the blood carrying capability of hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is what makes your blood red. It's the covering on your red blood cells. The better the hemoglobin, the healthier the hemoglobin, the better it will carry oxygen to the tissues and return carbon dioxide. And that the system, the way the hemoglobin dumps carbon dioxide in the lungs and picks up oxygen and then gets out to the tissues and dumps the oxygen and picks up carbon dioxide is a real trick. I remember in cardiology, we study the heart, the circulatory system for almost 4 months in school. And it's just one of the miracles of nature how that happens. And it's just a pressure thing. That's all, just pressure. The air pressure in your lungs is the same as the air pressure outside of your body. And when the air pressure is low, oxygen jumps on the hemoglobin and carbon dioxide comes off. And then the further it gets into the body, the greater the pressure is. And when the pressure reaches a certain point, as it does in the capillary beds, the oxygen jumps off and the carbon dioxide jumps back on. What a slick system. And when you are nutritionally healthy, you're not going to have a pounding heart. You're not going to have an extra beat. You're not going to feel like you're missing a beat. You're not going to feel like there's a rumble or something going on inside your chest. And you feel those things because the heart is screaming for nutrition. Every bit as a hungry baby in the middle of the night crying for its mother's breast. So if we make sure the heart has the calcium and the potassium, that the potassium-calcium balances are correct and the sodium-potassium balances are correct, the heart is going to work slick and you're not even going to know you have a heart. Now the use of, well, I was going to get into sugar. I want to get into maybe a little bit with hypertension. Hypertension can be aggravated by a potassium deficiency, and we use organically bound minerals for that. But the most common problem with hypertension brought on by a potassium deficiency is liver damage. And that will show up in your blood work as a high sedimentation rate. Sedimentation rate, if you don't know what that is, when they take your blood, if sedimentation rate is ordered, dying, dead, sick red blood cells, you put them into a specific type of medium in a tube, a test tube, and you rate how fast the blood cells are breaking down and the sediment falls to the bottom of the tube. I mean, that's not exactly what's going on, but it should give you an idea. You know, like if you had, just like salad dressing, or oil, water salad dressing, you shake it up like vinegar and oil. And then what happens? You shake it up, they mix a little bit, then all of a sudden the oil goes to the top and the vinegar goes to the bottom because the oil doesn't weigh as much. And so you have a sedimentation that takes place, separation of the constituents. Well, sedimentation rate is a good example of what low potassium brought on by a hypertension from low potassium hurting the liver. We use Cyruta, an incredible product. We use, Beta-Col. We use Beta-Col for the liver when those kinds of problems happen. Cholesterol accumulation that takes place in the blood vessels. We use Cyruta. It releases cholesterol from the tissues, let it get back to the liver where it can be oxidized. If the liver can't do its job, blood pressure will drop in this particular case and cholesterol levels will rise. Now I'm not worried and scared of cholesterol as much as some other people are, but if the body has extra cholesterol, it gets it out through the through the bile in the liver. If you have too much estrogen for estrogen-dominant women, excess bleeding, polyps, the other kinds of things that threaten to have these organs removed through hysterectomy. Usually, if we can increase the liver's production of bile, the body can get rid of the excess estrogen. The same thing with men who are having problems with ED or just decreasing sex drive. It's usually because they have elevated estradiol. Now, your testicles, guys, make estrogen. Every bit as a woman's ovary will make testosterone. The pituitary and the hypothalamus that are regulating levels of luteinizing hormone and follicle-stimulating hormone that are necessarily a part of the female cycle. Your body does it too, because just as it has an effect on the ovary, it has an effect on the testicles in sperm production. But in differing levels, differing levels. I could get a little more graphic, but I don't think I want to. But what I'm trying to say is that these organs have to be fed. No, I've been talking about the heart mostly, because we have a device, an incredible device, that is the digital form. I have one of the 1950 devices on display in my office that I used to use that had a little tape running out of it as we would monitor the heart. Now we can do it digitally on a computer screen. And if we had something like that that could measure the brain and its function, or the thyroid, or the adrenals, or the pancreas, or the liver, that would be great. The way we monitor those things now is through blood work. I keep thinking, boy, we ought to start doing blood work with our patients. We ought to be sending them out for blood panels, especially thyroid panels, because we can address thyroid insufficiencies, hypo as well as hyperthyroid, with nutritional changes. Just as we can help with infertility, and we can help with liver problems and kidney problems, just by changing certain nutritional components. It's interesting. I talked to a medical. I read this in a book, and then I had a medical doctor that I take care of confirm this for me, that you can be taught in pathology in medical school. And pathology is the study of disease. You can learn that a deficiency of vitamin C will cause scurvy. And scurvy is just where the tiny little blood vessels begin to break down and hemorrhage, and that's where you get a pink toothbrush and bloody gums and things like that. Eventually you can lose teeth. You can have scurvy in the heart. You can have scurvy anywhere in the body from a deficiency of vitamin C. And so I asked this doctor, you were taught that a vitamin C deficiency can cause scurvy. Yeah. Were you taught that an abundance of whole food vitamin C can cure scurvy? Well, no. Were you taught that an abundance of food-based thiamine, B vitamins, can improve heart function? No, of course not. No, because that's not the orientation of medicine that I was talking about in the first hour. Medicine is, we'll do what we can to help you get through life and avoid those landmines and those grenades and asteroids. But don't worry, if a landmine goes off, we have drugs to help you. We can probably give you a good life. Whereas the philosophy that I lean towards is, why not do that now? Why wait for the landmine? Why wait for the grenade? Do something now. Well, a lot of us don't like change. I am the king of not liking change. I hate change, and I don't know why. Maybe I'm mentally lazy. I just don't like change. But there are times when change is necessary. And when I saw what was happening to my pancreas back in 2015, and one of my best friends, childhood friends that I grew up with, Tom Drashall, died from pancreatic cancer. And his daughter, one of his daughters, who was like one of my own daughters because she was my daughter's best friend, sent me a picture of Tom in the hospital. And he was having serious pancreatic problems. And I could see in his face that his days were numbered. And broke my heart when I saw that. But he was sitting there in his hospital garb with his hand in a box of Munch-a-Bunch. The Munch-a-Bunch didn't kill him, but the sugar in his life overtaxed his pancreas, and who knows why he got pancreatic cancer. I can come up with a few theories, but I don't know. My point is this. My wife had given me a Father's Day present, I've talked about this before, of a heart calcium score, a heart calcium test. And you go in and they just do a CT scan on the heart with the technique set to where they can see the calcium deposits. And as it was scanning my heart, you know, you're just laying there. And when the score came out, the guy told me, oh, you're okay, you look pretty good, you're kind of clear. But they gave me a report. And it said that I had 4 spots in my heart where there was a little calcium building up. I've never had the test done since then because I'm afraid of what it'll show, which is why I take the massive amount of supplements that I take. I shouldn't have said that, but that's the truth. And so I didn't read the radiologist's report until, I don't know, several months later. And it said, it was looking at all the other organs, and it said that my pancreas was atrophic. It didn't have any definable borders to it. Uh-oh. That's when we created long life energy enzymes to rebuild the liver. I mean the pancreas, to rebuild the pancreas. Long life energy enzymes for the pancreas. 2 years of heavy doses of that. I went back in December of 2017 and had a pancreatic study done on an MRI, and it said, it's a little smaller than it should be, a little smaller than normal, but it looks perfectly okay. Again, using nutrition to take care of the problems of malnutrition that come across our plate as disease processes. All right, that's pretty well going to take care of it today for the health show today. I am putting the K-Talk back on auto, so it will switch over to the news when the news comes up. And so I want to thank you for being a part of the show today. This is, for those of you on the stream, I appreciate the fact that you're there and paying attention to what I've been talking about. This is recorded. You know, you can go to at Forbidden Doctor Trent at YouTube and X. Or X, it's, I think, Forbidden Doctor. At YouTube, it's Dr. Dr. Jack Stockwell. All right, I'm probably talking over the news. But anyway, I will see you all this coming Monday. That'll be it for today, and I'll shut that down and record that. And for those on the stream, thank you for so much of being a part. I really appreciate the fact that you're here. We'll do a good update Monday. And one of these days, I'm going to be doing some shorts that will be recorded at X and at Facebook, or I mean at YouTube. So I will see you all later.